Since time immemorial, throughout its history, humanity has tirelessly sought answers to the most fundamental questions of its existence: who we truly are, and how we can achieve true fullness of being, finding deep meaning in each lived day. In this continuous quest, Carl Gustav Jung, an eminent thinker and one of the most insightful explorers of the human unconscious, left behind a legacy of profound truths. His discoveries, like guiding stars, still resonate powerfully within the depths of every person's soul today. Within each of us, in the most hidden corners of our being, lies an invisible yet incredibly powerful facet, a part of our personality that seems frozen in time, trapped by childhood experiences. This unseen essence silently but steadily permeates and shapes all aspects of our adult lives, from daily decisions and emotional reactions to the depth and quality of our relationships with the world and others. It is astonishing how many individuals live their lives completely unaware of the presence of this inner child, which, like a forgotten treasure, still awaits its moment, crying out for recognition, attention, and most importantly, healing. Jung, with his deep understanding of the human psyche, taught us that our inner self is a complex mosaic composed of many interconnected facets. And among them, undoubtedly one of the most influential and formative is that very childlike part that each of us carries throughout our lives. However, when this inner child, this tender and vulnerable part, endured traumatic experiences, be it deep emotional rejection, painful abandonment, or other forms of unbearable pain, the wounds received do not simply vanish. Instead, they transform into a hidden shadow, an invisible companion that subtly but destructively influences our entire adult life. Unaware of the true causes of their suffering, people often find themselves trapped in recurring behavioral patterns, as if in a vicious cycle. They may react disproportionately, sometimes even irrationally, to mundane situations, experiencing a storm of emotions out of proportion to the external stimulus. And most disturbingly, they may feel a deep, inexplicable emptiness within, an insatiable longing that nothing external seems capable of filling. This emptiness, like a bottomless pit, continues to gape despite all attempts to suppress it, leaving a person in a state of constant search and dissatisfaction. This is the key to understanding many of our problems, and recognizing it is merely the first step on the path to true liberation. One might imagine themselves becoming that child again. Recalling that period, one can see how they were when they felt no fear in expressing their sincere emotions, when their trust in the world was boundless and their belief in the magic of life unwavering. The question arises, at what point does this spontaneity fade? When does one begin to feel the need to hide, build defenses, or pretend to be someone else for acceptance? Carl Gustav Jung, the renowned thinker, asserted that such experiences do not vanish without a trace. They remain deep within the unconscious, influencing every subsequent choice an individual makes. This so-called inner child does not remain merely a part of the past. Its presence is distinctly evident in every current attitude one holds toward the world and oneself. It's quite probable that one might have noticed certain patterns. Despite efforts at self-improvement, they continue to attract partners who evoke feelings of insecurity, are unable to truly appreciate them, or leave them with a crushing sense of inadequacy. Similarly, in the professional sphere, difficulties may arise in setting boundaries, feeling an excessive need to exert effort for recognition, or perceiving any criticism, even minor, far more painfully than it should be. All these behavioral and emotional reactions typically originate from a deep source, from the unhealed wounds of that very inner child. Carl Jung, the eminent thinker, discovered that the only way to free oneself from deep-seated psychological patterns is through direct and conscious confrontation. Instead of ignoring or suppressing the pain emanating from the so-called inner child, it is necessary to provide it with space for full expression and subsequent healing. When this happens, one witnesses truly incredible changes. The perception of the world transforms, interpersonal relationships acquire a new quality, and existence itself ceases to feel like a continuous struggle. Perhaps a natural question arises, how does one begin to heal this intimate part of oneself? The key to this process lies in deep self-analysis, and sincere reconciliation with one's own life story. First and foremost, one needs to acknowledge the presence of this inner child. Every time an irrational fear, unexplained insecurity, or sudden sadness is felt, instead of dismissing these feelings, one should ask, what part of me is experiencing these emotions? Where does this feeling originate? Sometimes, such an inner dialogue leads to vivid childhood memories, to those moments when one felt not good enough or believed it was necessary to be different to earn love and acceptance. Jung particularly emphasized the power of symbols and the subtle language of the unconscious. Often the inner child manifests through dreams, inexplicable bodily sensations, or even recurring life scenarios. If one pays attention, they might notice how certain situations seem to repeat cyclically, as if life itself is persistently trying to convey a message that has remained unheard until now. Healing the inner child is not a momentary event, not a fleeting effort. It is a continuous dedication to one's well-being, a daily and conscious commitment to oneself. This path means allowing oneself to re-experience emotions that were once forcibly suppressed. It requires showing oneself true care and compassion, treating oneself with the same tenderness and understanding as one would a frightened child. It also means granting oneself the right to carefree play, to genuine laughter, free from fear of judgment, and to reconnect with the primal, untouched part of one's being. When one begins this process, an amazing transformation unfolds. The true feminine nature gains freedom. According to Carl Gustav Jung, archetypal masculine and feminine components harmoniously coexist within every human being. This feminine energy is not tied to biological sex. It represents a deep, fundamental quality of the human soul. It is the manifestation of the capacity for acceptance, for flexibly following the flow of life, for nurturing, and for creation stemming from the heart. However, when the inner child suffers from past traumas, this life-giving energy becomes blocked. One becomes rigid, overly distrustful, losing the ability to genuinely open up to life and authentic love. The current world, with its dominant attitudes, has instilled in humanity the idea of needing to be exclusively strong, completely independent, and absolutely self-sufficient. And while these characteristics undoubtedly hold significant value, their excessive, absolute manifestation inevitably alienates us from our deep feminine essence. Humanity has become accustomed to existing in a permanent state of anxiety, constantly on the defensive, not allowing itself to simply be in the moment, to just be. However, as Jung emphasized, true power does not lie in the pursuit of isolation or self-protection. On the contrary, it lies in the ability to allow oneself to experience the full spectrum of emotions, in the wise and conscious acceptance of one's own vulnerability, and in restoring a deep connection with inner intuition. Healing the inner child serves as a fundamental key to profound transformation. It is a bridge bringing one back to their authentic self. When this inner part of the personality, symbolizing the child, feels safe, knowing it will not be rejected or abandoned, it dares to emerge without the slightest fear. In this state, the purest feminine essence is revealed, a magnetic energy that needs not fight or prove anything, for it simply exists. Every step taken towards healing the inner child is a decisive movement towards a more authentic life. However, this path requires considerable courage, for it entails bravely facing deep wounds that one may have long tried to ignore. It also means ceasing the constant search for external approval and beginning to give oneself the unconditional love that was always needed. As Carl Gustav Jung asserted, the process of individuation, the path to wholeness, is not about striving to become someone else, but about remembering who one always was, before the world began to dictate who they should be. As the healing process progresses, one begins to notice profound changes in their daily life. They gradually surround themselves with people who genuinely value them, as they no longer settle for less than they deserve. The need for external approval disappears, for an inner realization of one's own sufficiency and worth emerges. And, perhaps most significantly, the ability to enjoy every moment of being is restored, living in a state of full presence and inner completeness. The path to healing is neither swift nor linear. Along this journey, there will inevitably be days when one feels inner peace and confidence, and other moments when it may seem like a regression has occurred. Nevertheless, every action, no matter how small, holds deep meaning. Each time an individual chooses to show themselves love and compassion instead of self-flagellation, each time they decide to listen to their own inner voice instead of ignoring it, the healing process takes place. And this healing transforms not only one's personal life but also influences future generations. In particular, when a woman begins to heal her inner child, she breaks destructive patterns that have been passed down for generations. She becomes a beacon of light for those around her, demonstrating that it is possible to live in accordance with one's authentic essence and deep self-love. The question arises, is one ready to take this first step? Are they ready to look within and embrace the child who has waited so long to be seen and loved? The answer to this question lies within each person, and the most opportune time to begin is right now. The process of healing the inner child is not just about recalling past events, but about changing one's relationship with oneself in the present moment. Many mistakenly believe that healing implies reliving old wounds, but in reality it's about giving them a new, transformative meaning. Carl Gustav Jung taught that the human psyche possesses an amazing capacity for self-healing, provided it is allowed to integrate those aspects that have been suppressed for many years. Over the years, individuals tend to learn to suppress their own inner voice. People grew up in a world that persistently instilled in them the need to be unwavering and resilient, asserted that no vulnerability should be shown, and demanded unconditional conformity to others' expectations in order to gain love or acceptance. However, each time an individual followed this instruction, each time they sacrificed their authenticity in an attempt to fit into accepted norms, their inner child felt abandoned and forsaken. And this deep sense of abandonment, though not always consciously recognized, continues to significantly influence adult decisions, the nature of relationships, and one's overall perception of the world. Upon closer inspection, it becomes evident that many of an individual's current behavioral reactions are echoes not of the mature person they are in the present, but precisely of that inner child who is still desperately seeking protection. Perhaps one experienced deep anxiety when someone close distanced themselves, as if a fear of being abandoned again lurked deep inside. Perhaps they strived to avoid any conflict at all costs, having learned in childhood that openly expressing one's emotions could lead to rejection. Or perhaps an individual has reached such a level of self-sufficiency that it is extremely difficult for them to ask for help, having once been convinced of the impossibility of relying on anyone else. The eminent psychologist Carl Jung often emphasized the fundamental importance of integrating the so-called shadow, that hidden part of the human personality that an individual prefers not to notice or even deny. For many women, the wounded inner child becomes this powerful, unconscious shadow. It skillfully masks itself behind a facade of extreme independence, a drive for perfectionism, or a deeply rooted fear of vulnerability. However, no matter how hard one tries to suppress this part of themselves, it will inevitably find a way to manifest. This can be expressed through destructive, toxic relationships, through obsessive, repetitive behavioral patterns, or even through physical illnesses, as the body and mind are inextricably linked, and everything that remains unhealed in the psyche, sooner or later, manifests in some bodily form. The healing process in this context means giving a voice to this inner child. It implies allowing it to experience and express the feelings it could not articulate or live through at the time. Often the simple yet profound act of writing a letter to this child, speaking to it aloud, visualizing it, and uttering the words it always needed, can become a true turning point in one's life. This is undoubtedly a symbolic act, but Jung taught that the unconscious functions precisely through symbols, and when one brings closure to these unfinished moments of the past, they release a colossal amount of energy that was previously trapped in these traumatic memories. By healing their inner child, an individual simultaneously transforms their feminine energy. For the true essence of femininity lies not in imposed fragility or submission, but in a deep capacity for acceptance, an intuitive connection with oneself and the world, and the ability to create from the heart. When the inner child remains wounded, this vital energy is blocked. One becomes overly rigid, distrustful, completely disconnected from their intuition. But when healing occurs, when one learns to nurture themselves instead of passively waiting for someone else to do it for them, then this fundamental connection with their true, natural essence is restored. One might assume that this path does not mean complete freedom from fear or insecurity. On the contrary, the healing process appears as a continuous journey, a true odyssey of self-discovery and profound transformation. However, the key difference lies in learning to consciously manage one's wounds instead of passively submitting to their influence. Instead of reacting under the pressure of pain, one begins to act guided by wisdom. Instead of desperately seeking approval from outside, the individual gains the ability to give it to themselves. This deep internal change affects not only one's relationship with oneself, but also everything around them. When the inner child is healed, the way one interacts with others also changes. One stops settling for meager relationships and refuses to tolerate connections that drain their energy. They become more selective, and this selectivity stems not from fear, but from a deep and sincere self-love. For when an individual recognizes their true worth and learns to meet their own needs, there is no longer any need to desperately seek someone else to do it for them. The renowned psychologist Jung asserted that the purpose of life lies in individuation, becoming the person we truly are without masks and without imposed conventions. But this process is only possible when one dares to look within, when they stop running from their own essence. And in this grand journey, healing the inner child is one of the most significant and fundamental steps. This process can awaken emotions that one has long buried. Initially, one will likely feel resistance, as if a part of them wishes to continue neglecting the past. However, it is important to remember that every emerging feeling represents a chance for healing. Instead of avoiding it, it is crucial to feel it, observe it carefully, and give it the necessary space. Gradually, one will notice how this inner essence, this inner child, begins to trust again. External reality is often perceived as a direct reflection of one's inner universe. If there is a desire to transform one's existence, to gain more love, deep peace, and true authenticity in life, then this inner work must first be undertaken. It is remarkable that it is never too late to begin this process. One's inner child is still there, patiently waiting. And when it is finally given the boundless love it has always needed, then the realization will come. Everything that was sought in the outside world has actually always been within. From the moment one begins to heal their inner child, their entire life undergoes significant changes. These transformations are not momentary, but profoundly fundamental. In the initial stages, a noticeable resistance may arise, as the unconscious is not accustomed to having its voice heard and acknowledged. As Carl Gustav Jung noted, the human psyche tends to create various defense mechanisms in an attempt to avoid painful experiences, and one of the most common among these is distraction. Often, when an individual approaches the moment of confronting their deep emotions, they instinctively find many ways to evade it. They immerse themselves in tireless work, get entangled in conflicting interpersonal relationships, or seek refuge in endless entertainment. However, the truth is that pain does not disappear simply because it is ignored. It continues to exist, residing in the physical body, in the mental space, and in the depths of the soul, patiently awaiting its recognition. One of the most evident indicators of a wounded inner child is a pervasive feeling of inner emptiness. This is a constant sensation that something vital is missing, and despite all efforts and achievements, a certain unfilled void continues to gape inside. Many individuals attempt to compensate for this inner vacuum through interpersonal connections, professional successes, or the pursuit of external approval. However, the distinguished psychoanalyst Carl Gustav Jung warned that this emptiness is not something to be filled from external sources. On the contrary, it represents a persistent call from the deep unconscious, serving as a signal that lost or forgotten aspects of the personality urgently require reintegration. As an individual embarks on the process of inner healing, noticeable changes begin to manifest in their emotional landscape. In the initial stages of this journey, feelings of deep sadness, poignant nostalgia, and even righteous anger may arise. However, it is important to understand that these experiences are not inherently negative. They serve as guiding beacons, pointing to those aspects of the personality that have long remained suppressed. Instead of rejecting or suppressing these feelings, it is crucial to allow oneself to fully experience them. It is recommended to record them in written form, immerse oneself in them through meditation, or find other adequate means of expression. Each such action contributes to the release of a significant amount of energy that was previously blocked within the confines of the past. Furthermore, an integral component of this process is developing the skill of recognizing and differentiating between the voice of one's own inner child and the voice of the ego. Carl Gustav Jung described the ego as a crucial part of the psychic apparatus, designed to perform a protective function, yet often it is this very part that holds the individual captive in limiting behavioral patterns. The ego's voice is typically characterized by heightened criticality, a drive for perfectionism, and pervasive fear. It persistently instills in one a sense of inadequacy, undermines trust in others, and urges continuous self-protection. However, the voice of the inner child sounds entirely different. It possesses greater purity, emotional depth, and genuine sincerity. It is this voice that whispers of a yearning for love, a desire to be seen, and a deep need to be heard. As an individual progresses along the path of healing, they begin to notice an enhancement of their intuition. Carl Jung, the distinguished thinker, spoke of the unconscious as an inexhaustible source of wisdom, but to access it one must first learn to listen to its voice. Often the answers sought externally already reside within, but the external world, full of noise and distractions, hinders their clear perception. In the process of reconnecting with one's inner child, this inner voice becomes clearer. The individual begins to place more trust in themselves, their decisions, and their emotions. Changes also affect the realm of relationships. One of the most striking discoveries during this process is the realization that many dynamics experienced in personal connections were not actually about other people, but were related to unresolved inner wounds. Perhaps one noticed constantly attracting the same type of personalities, or that certain situations repeatedly occurred with different partners. Jung taught that such phenomena are not mere coincidences. The unconscious is striving to demonstrate something. When an inner wound remains unhealed, the individual unconsciously attempts to recreate the circumstances that gave rise to it, hoping for a different outcome. This is why many people find themselves in relationships that reproduce the same patterns as in childhood, not because they wish to suffer, but because the unconscious seeks resolution. However, true resolution is not achieved by repeating the old story with a new person. It comes through awareness, through changing the internal narrative, and through healing from within. When an individual embarks on their healing journey, they gradually free themselves from the burden of relationships rooted in deep need. The necessity for constant external approval diminishes as one learns to find self-affirmation within themselves. As a consequence of this inner transformation, one's environment also changes. They are replaced by those who harmonize with their personal growth, who show true respect, and who genuinely value their authentic essence. However, the most fundamental transformation affects one's own perception and relationship with oneself. In the context of this inner journey, Carl Gustav Jung, the eminent thinker, asserted that true individuation, the very process of becoming the person one truly is, in all their uniqueness, becomes possible only when all aspects of their psyche are integrated. This includes even those parts of the personality that were previously rejected or suppressed. In this comprehensive process, the healing of the so-called inner child acquires a special, truly pivotal significance. As one navigates this challenging yet vital path, it often becomes clear that many deeply ingrained beliefs about oneself are not, in fact, one's own. Perhaps one grew up internalizing ideas of inadequacy, intellectual deficiency, or low self-worth. However, a natural question arises: what is the true origin of these beliefs? Often, they are perspectives absorbed in early years, shaped by past experiences and how one interpreted the world at that time. It's crucial to understand that these beliefs are not unshakable, absolute truths. They are merely internal narratives that can be re-evaluated and transformed. The healing process involves consciously choosing the individual story one wishes to tell about themselves. It entails releasing the repetitive patterns of past life scripts to create an entirely new narrative founded on self-love, unconditional acceptance, and one's authentic nature. When such a transformation occurs, all aspects of existence begin to align in ways previously unimaginable. This is not a simple change, but a profound journey of self-discovery, reconnection, and comprehensive transformation. This journey demands considerable courage, yet it bestows an indescribable sense of freedom that few ever experience. For when an individual heals their inner child, when they bestow upon it the unconditional love it always craved, an incredible realization dawns. The understanding that one has always been self-sufficient, always worthy of love, and has always possessed everything needed to live a full and authentic life. As an individual begins to experience this profound inner transformation, they distinctly notice how their interactions with the world undergo changes, initially subtle yet immensely powerful. What once provoked anger or caused pain loses its former hold over them. This occurs not due to changes in external circumstances, but as a result of the evolution of one's own internal perception. As Carl Gustav Jung taught, the external world is merely a mirror reflection of our inner state. If one previously felt a constant need for self-protection or believed no one could understand them or felt invisible, it is highly probable that these feelings stemmed from an unhealed wound of their inner child. However, when the healing process takes place, when one comprehends their true inner worth, they definitively cease seeking external validation and approval. Yet this does not mean the path will be without difficulties. Healing, by its very nature, is not a destination, but a continuous and dynamic journey. Inevitably, there will be moments when one feels significant progress, but also days when it seems they have returned to the very beginning. Nevertheless, every step taken holds immense value. Each time one consciously chooses to show themselves compassion instead of harsh criticism, each time they decide to listen to their inner voice rather than ignore it, they lay the foundation for a healthier and more harmonious relationship with themselves. One of the most transformative aspects of this profound process is the realization that external approval is no longer a prerequisite. From early childhood, many women were taught that their self-worth was determined by how others perceived them, whether they were good enough, lovable enough, or met certain societal expectations. However, this belief is nothing more than an illusion. True self-love stems not from external praise or recognition, but from one's ability to approve of themselves from within. And when this internal approval is achieved, something truly remarkable happens. The individual transforms into a kind of magnet. This occurs not because they consciously seek attention from others, but because the very energy they radiate undergoes a fundamental change. The eminent psychologist Carl Gustav Jung repeatedly emphasized that the integration of the shadow is a fundamental step on the path to holistic personal development. By shadow, he did not mean something exclusively negative, but rather those aspects of the personality that an individual preferred not to notice or suppressed. Often in the past, one might have been taught to quiet their voice, diminish the importance of their feelings, or were instilled with the belief that expressing one's needs was a sign of selfishness. However, the process of shadow integration involves reclaiming these lost parts of oneself, gaining the inner freedom to be authentic without fear of judgment from others or one's own inner critic. This transformative path directly influences the formation of healthy personal boundaries. Many people, and especially women who have experienced inner child trauma, often feel a deep need to please others, believing that this is the only way to earn love and acceptance. It's common to observe them agreeing to things while deep down they wish to say no, yielding to others' desires merely to avoid potential conflict or disapproval. However, as the healing process begins, a realization dawns. Setting boundaries is not an act of selfishness, but rather a true act of self-love and respect. The ability to decline what doesn't align with one's inner values and needs becomes a powerful tool for preserving one's energy and honoring one's true self. And when one allows themselves this without guilt, they begin to attract people into their life who genuinely respect their authentic essence. The healing process does not imply the complete disappearance of natural human experiences like pain or fear. On the contrary, it means gaining the ability to effectively interact with these emotions as they arise, without allowing them to completely dominate one's existence. It also implies that during life's trials and challenges, one will rely not on automatic reactions dictated by past traumas, but on a deep understanding of the situation, stemming from a state of true awareness. This is where the true freedom of the human spirit lies. This profound transformation impacts not only an individual's emotional sphere, but also their physical state. When mind and soul achieve harmonious interaction, the human body responds with positive changes. A direct link is often observed between manifestations such as chronic ailments, heightened anxiety or debilitating fatigue, and unresolved internal emotional traumas. As Carl Gustav Jung aptly noted, what is not brought to consciousness and processed at a conscious level ultimately manifests as inevitable fate. This principle applies equally to one's emotional well-being and their physical health. When one begins to release these inner wounds, allowing themselves to finally let go of the heavy emotional burden they have carried for so long, they distinctly feel a transformation in their life energy. The physical body ceases to be in a continuous state of danger readiness, the nervous system harmonizes, sleep quality improves, and the individual begins to feel significantly lighter, more fully present in the moment, and more deeply connected to the flow of life. This undoubtedly is one of the most magnificent gifts on this path of transformation, the realization that the peace and harmony one has long sought in the external world have always resided within their own inner space. In the course of this profound, transformative process, an individual begins to realize that what was once perceived as unattainable or impossible now becomes an organic part of their being. Fear that once constrained gives way to unwavering confidence, and nagging doubts dissipate, giving birth to crystal clarity. This occurs not because external circumstances become simpler or more serene, but solely because one's attitude towards them fundamentally shifts, transforming their inner landscape of perception. As the deep wounds of the inner child gradually heal, the mature woman experiences her true rebirth. And this rebirth is not merely a fleeting internal change, but a grand metamorphosis that completely reshapes her view of herself and the world around her. From now on, instead of feeling as though she needs external salvation, she deeply realizes that only she herself can be her true savior. Instead of desperately seeking love externally in the world or from other people, she discovers that the deepest and most significant attachment is the one she gives to herself, cultivating self-acceptance and compassion. And instead of being tormented by a sense of inadequacy, she arrives at an unconditional understanding. She always was and remains absolutely sufficient, whole, and valuable. At this pivotal moment, the realization dawns that healing is not only an invaluable gift to oneself, but also a powerful legacy for future generations. Each time she consciously breaks destructive patterns of the past, each time she chooses the path of healing instead of endlessly repeating old mistakes, she forges an entirely new path, not only for herself, but for all women who will walk it in the future. The power of inner child healing can not only transform an individual human life, but also profoundly impact everyone surrounding that person. When a woman achieves inner healing, her energetic field shifts, her presence becomes different, and her way of interacting with the world and others undergoes significant changes. Such a transformation never goes unnoticed by those around her. She becomes an inexhaustible source of inspiration for others, acting as a bright beacon of light, demonstrating the possibility of living in full authenticity, experiencing wholeness and deep self-love. This path is an individual's personal journey, and only they have the right to decide when to take the first step on this challenging yet beneficial path. However, once that step is taken, it can be confidently asserted that the individual will never be the same. For once one has healed, once they have realized their true deep worth, there is no turning back. It is her moment, her unique chance to reclaim everything that has always rightfully belonged to her. When one begins to live guided by this new level of consciousness, everything around them starts to reflect the internal changes that have occurred. Relationships that were once perceived as complex challenges or insurmountable obstacles cease to exert their former destructive influence. Repetitive behavioral patterns and life scripts that previously replayed constantly begin to gradually disappear as one no longer vibrates at the same frequency as the old wounds of the past. Their energy changes, and with it, how they perceive and experience life in all its manifestations fundamentally shifts. The renowned thinker Carl Jung asserted that wholeness is achieved when an individual reconciles with all aspects of their personality. The truly great gift of this profound process is the restoration of one's authentic essence, inner power, and the ability to exist guided by love rather than by restrictive fear. Healing the inner child is merely a starting point for a significantly deeper journey, where one ceases to be a hostage to external circumstances and gains the ability to actively shape their own reality. One should reflect on the significance that complete liberation from the insecurity, fears, and doubts that may have burdened them for many years will hold. Imagine starting each day with a sense of fullness, inner balance, and unwavering confidence that there's no need to change anything about yourself to be loved or to feel sufficient. This is where true freedom, accessible to everyone, lies. This transformative journey is not meant to be traveled alone. In the modern world, many people, like others, are on a path of deep personal transformation. By joining forces, these individuals can help spread this message, assisting more and more women in realizing and awakening their true inner strength. When a message resonates deeply within one's soul, when an inner feeling suggests that these words were exactly what they needed to hear, then a natural desire arises to share them. In such cases, it is suggested not to keep this valuable insight to oneself, but rather to spread it. It is highly probable that someone in one's circle urgently needs such words today. Perhaps it's someone caught in repetitive behavioral patterns they cannot recognize or break. It could be someone who has not yet discovered that the true key to their inner freedom and liberation has always been hidden within the depths of their own being. Sharing one's personal experience becomes extremely important, as every such story shared publicly serves as a powerful catalyst. It helps a significant number of people recognize themselves in the described situations, understand their own difficulties, and, most importantly, dare to begin their own individual process of healing and transformation. It is crucial to always remember that within each person, absolutely everything needed to fully heal from past wounds, to transform and to begin living in full accordance with their true, authentic self is already contained. This is a fundamental truth that should guide. One should realize that genuine change begins precisely in the present moment, and these fateful changes originate directly from the individual themselves.